This is Paul McGann, and you're listening to the Five-ish Fangirls podcast.
Five-ish Fangirls, I love you, and I'm one of the five-ish. In fact, I'm the biggest one of the five-ish. I am the Sixth Doctor Colin Baker, and I wish you all well. Have fun.
We continue all the way to episode 281 of the Five-ish Fangirls podcast, and we always dress for the occasion. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Five-ish Fangirls podcast. So glad you could join us. Let's start off like we do every week with the virtual table and see who's joined us this week.
This is Brittany in Bethlehem.
This is Chrissy in Salt Lake City.
This is Holly from Wisconsin.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So we are going to have some fun with this week's episode because it's our birthday.
Happy birthday to us. Happy
As we're
birthday
recording
to
this.
us.
Of course, that also means it's Colin Baker's birthday, but...
Yep. Well, how apropos. How
I
old
know.
are we turning?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and what doctor did Colin Baker play?
Yeah.
Yep. Yes. It is.
No singing! Even if it's not copyright. Go away.
Chauncey.
It's also, this is weird, it's also 10 years since I first watched Doctor Who.
Yes.
Wow.
I know, it's weird that I know that date, but I do.
It's just Rachel hanging out with her friends. It's turned in like this empire, so congratulations.
Thank you. Yep.
I was like, are we supposed to hear that?
Yeah. It just got, bombed with a happy birthday from Chauncey. So,
You.
Aw.
Aw, thank you, Chauncey.
Thanks, Chauncey.
Chauncey.
he was just saying, he's like, when I started this, he was like, oh, it's just Rachel hanging out with her friends. And it's like, look at this now.
Yep. Oh, I will never look at Frozen the same way again.
Yeah.
No, indeed.
Yeah, but it's it is our birthday, and we try to celebrate accordingly. So I thought it would be fun to kind of go back to our roots, as it were, because the whole reason that we got together in the first place is because of Doctor Who.
That is true.
So we thought, in the spirit of all things Who. And because we're all still waiting for movie theaters to maybe open sometime in the next millennia, we would go into the Wayback Machine and take a look at the Doctor Who TV movie that was released in 1996.
Yes.
But of course, we can't talk Doctor Who with just we can just talk Doctor Who with just ourselves, but it's way more fun with friends. So we also thought it would be fun to bring on a friend of the show, and apparently longtime listener, and other things, about the internet. I don't even know where to start to introduce and even talk about all the things you're involved in. So, Nick, I will let you do that for yourself because your CV is very long and it keeps getting longer.
Well, first off, hey everybody, and first off, happy birthday, congratulations, mazel tov, and more. I have to say, it's truly an honor to be joining you today on your 6th birthday. Not to mention to discuss one of my obsessions and favorite topics, Doctor Who. And I have been listening to your show for quite some time, and it's just wonderful to have actually witnessed you guys just grow and go from strength to strength. So it's fantastic. So really congratulations on that. And I'm super happy to be here today.
Thanks.
Well, we're happy to have you. So
yes.
you want to go ahead and plug some of your stuff, or is it too
Well,
much, or
okay,
would
yeah,
we be
no,
here
no.
all day?
I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. But mainly what I do is, well, first off, my day job, I host the Whiskey and Cigarettes show, which is a country music radio show, which is aired FM on net and AM radio throughout the world. And if anybody's interested who is fans of country music, they can find everything about pertaining to that on whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. Added to that, I host the Happiness and Darkness podcast, which is a superhero movie podcast where every week with a different co-host, we discuss a movie of their choice. And actually, Holly and Rachel, we've been very happy to have both Holly and Rachel on the show to discuss movies, among these Howard the Duck and Captain Marvel. And definitely kudos to Holly for wanting to take on Howard the Duck.
You're welcome.
She survived.
And added to that, now we're recently going to be unveiling a new project, which Rachel is going to be a part of, which is actually Gold Standard, the Oscars podcast, where we will be going through every single Oscar-winning movie for Best Picture from Wings back in 1927 all the way up to Parasite, or probably by the time we get there,
Yeah.
there were going to be other Oscars awarded out. But yeah, Rachel and Zan Sprouse will be joining us on this bi-weekly podcast. And Rachel, now that I actually get to talk to you, I want to thank you so much for wanting to join me on this crazy ride.
Oh, like I said in our chat, thank you for even considering me and asking. You know, I saw your message and I was like, that's an interesting topic and would definitely cause me to have to stretch my comfort level when it comes to watching movies, which in itself is a good thing. You know, I wasn't, you know, part of me was a little bit hesitant about taking on another podcast, but you know, it's just the opportunity was just too enticing for me to say no. And hopefully I told Chauncey afterwards, I'm like, yeah, it's just I'm just working on building my media empire. So Seth Rogen better watch out, or Joe Rogan and all those other people need to watch out. So I'm coming for you.
I think it's going to be a fun thing for everyone. Plus, I'll finally get to see movies that my grandmother always yelled at me about for never watching.
Yeah, there's a lot on there where, you know, you see like, you know, the 100 movies you need to see before you die, and I'm like, never really been enticed to watch them, but I guess I'm going to now. Thankfully, I've already got Lawrence of Arabia checked off, so I'm not going to have to watch that when we get to it.
You'll just
I
say,
am going to have to watch Gone with the Wind, though, so.
It's going to be a
That
first
one?
for everybody, I think.
Yeah.
that one, I mean, I mentioned when we talked about Lawrence of Arabia, Gone with the Wind was my grandma's favorite movie. When I finally saw it after she'd passed away, I was like, why did she love this movie? Now I've watched it a couple more times. I'm like, I can see why. It's still not my favorite, but I appreciate it a little more.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it'll just be an interesting, it'll be interesting to watch the progression of not only cinema, but what the quote unquote, you know, experts or whatever, you know, if you consider the Academy experts or whatever, you know, the cream, what they consider to be the best of the best. So it'll be an interesting adventure, and I look forward to, at the very least, doing all the behind the scenes research, because that's definitely my favorite part of all of this, hence the pile of notes I have in front of me just for this one movie. So speaking of which, we don't have any news. Sometimes we skip the news when we have guests, but in this case we actually don't have any, so that's a good thing, I guess. And we don't have any feedback, so other than the happy birthday messages we've been receiving from people on social media, and we greatly appreciate all that. So you know, we love reading, but sometimes it's hard to find time to physically sit down with a book, which is why the Five-ish Fangirls has proudly partnered with Audible. Audible is a leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs. Whatever makes you squee, there's a perfect listen for you. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals. Whether you're adventuring through time and space, running from dinosaurs, or capturing ghosts, with the free app, audiobooks go where you go. You can download titles and listen offline, anytime, anywhere. Even if you switch devices, you'll never lose your place. And right now, Five-ish Fangirls listeners can sign up for a free 30-day trial by going to audibletrial.com/5ishfangirls. That's 30 days to check out not only their huge collection of audiobooks, but also podcasts, guided wellness programs, theatrical performances, A-list comedy, and exclusive Audible originals you won't find anywhere else. So continue the joy of reading with Audible. Don't see a title that trips your trigger one month? No problem. Your credit will roll over to the next month, and you can quit anytime and keep the books you've acquired forever. For more details and to sign up for your free 30-day trial, visit audibletrial.com/5ishfangirls. That's audibletrial.com/5ishfangirls. And now, back to the podcast. So with that, I guess we'll just jump right into our main topic, which is Doctor Who, the TV movie, which was released in 1996. We'll start with some background because the story of how this movie came about and how we ended up with what we ended up with is very interesting.
Yeah. I have the special edition DVD, and the documentary on that was really worth it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, go if you have that DVD, go watch that documentary. It's very eye-opening, and I don't know, as much as I've been immersed in Doctor Who for the last 10 years, and like just out of my own curiosity, when I found out about this, I'm like, this one little TV movie had so much going on and so much going against it just to get off the ground. And I'm like, as much as some parts of fandom are like, oh, it's not very good. It's like, well, we're lucky we got anything at all.
Yeah. Exactly.
This came out in 1996. Doctor Who had been off the air at this point for 7 years. It had been canceled in 89 with Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor at the time. And even then, apparently, that not even a decade of there being no Doctor Who, that people could not stand that there was no Who, and were chomping at the bit to revive it in some form or fashion. And these people got together and pitched it to the BBC, but also they wanted to possibly find a way to revive the series in America. So it wasn't just a BBC production. They had to pitch it to the Americans as well.
And hold on to your seats when you find out who they pitched it to.
Yeah. So at the time, Philip Siegel, who ended up actually being the producer, was trying to make this movie. At the same time, there was another company that had the rights to a theatrical version of Doctor Who, but their rights were getting ready to expire while Siegel was trying to secure his version. The other company tried to extend their rights by and this is actually a fairly common thing. If you actually listen to, it's a short episode, but the You're Gonna Love This or Not podcast is just part of the Geeking in Indiana family podcast. They just released an episode that they had decided not to release when they recorded it, but of the 94 it was like the 1994 Fantastic Four movie. And that was because they needed to produce something to keep the rights to that property. So this is a kind of a common thing. So this company that had the rights to a theatrical Doctor Who film decided to try to shoot something so that they keep the rights but it was with Leonard Nimoy as the Doctor.
Oh boy.
That would have been interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm just scrolling through the list for the actors for Master, and it's just like,
Yeah, we'll get to that.
holy cow, and
Yeah.
especially one of them.
Yeah.
A few of them.
But apparently Philip Siegel was able to he found out about this somehow, told Leonard Nimoy what was happening, and Nimoy backed out, allowing those rights to expire, allowing Philip Siegel to get the rights. So, thank you, Leonard Nimoy.
Yes.
Yes.
And now that you've said that, I was sad when Leonard Nimoy passed away originally. Now I'm even more sad because now we can't have a Doctor Who Unbound from Big Finish with Leonard Nimoy as the Doctor.
Yeah.
These are the things I think about.
Yeah. And then once they actually got the rights and started working on production, actually Steven Spielberg was involved for a short time because he owns Amblin Television. And apparently the early version of the script went through so many versions, but an early version of the script had the Doctor of World War II battling Nazis in search of an ancient artifact, but Spielberg was like, that sounds awfully familiar.
I was gonna say,
that sounds a bit Indiana Jonesy.
Yeah.
And the Last Crusade.
Yeah, just a little. So he decided that he was going to pull out, but the producers didn't tell the BBC that Spielberg had pulled out until they were already under production, so that they would funding.
Maybe, and reading that little tidbit, I'm like, you know what? They knew how the BBC felt about Doctor Who at the time, and so they're just like, you know what? We're just not going to tell them.
Yeah.
Until it's too late for them to do anything about this, because we're gonna make this happen, and you know what, whatever you have to do to get the job done.
Yeah, and of course us, I wasn't a Doctor Who fan at the time. Obviously, I did not know Doctor Who. I didn't know the TARDIS from Magic School Bus in 1996. So. I would not have had a clue that this was, the Doctor Who was a thing and that there was a possibility that may be coming back. I know from the rest of you guys that you are in the same boat, but Nick, being
I kind of
you are the oldest.
Yeah, I kind of had an inkling because I can remember seeing the older Doctor Who on PBS, and I remember hearing, oh, it's going to be on Fox. I set it up to tape on a VHS tape and had it labeled, had everything good to go. Before that DVD came out, you do not know how many times I've tried to rifle through all my VHS tapes trying to find my copy.
Yeah.
Still can't find it to this day. So I was very happy when it came out for American release, because I was half tempted to pick up a region-free DVD player and plunk down some decent coin to get a international
we'll talk about that too later. But
it was Nick, kind of on my radar, but not quite.
Yeah. So Nick, as the non-American, do you have any memories or vague recollections of chatter in the mid-90s, post Who being canceled and all that?
Well, you know what? It's very weird because at the time, in Italy, nobody knew who Doctor Who was, period, until New Who arrived. It just wasn't a thing. Because I guess maybe they saw it was maybe too British for the Italian audience.
A British TV show made too British. Imagine that.
Basically, what was weird was having had the privilege of being in an international environment, as I went to an international school as a child. So I was with a lot of kids from all over the world. So you had folks from the UK, from the US and stuff. And I actually there was a dear friend of mine who was from Australia, and he was a huge fan of Doctor Who, and he kept going on about the Daleks and the Cybermen and what have you, because his mom had been a huge fan of classic Who and had kind of indoctrinated him into the Who world. And so that's how I just basically got it from talk. As my, should we say, visual first meeting with the Doctor was actually when New Who came around because of Netflix having it on over here in Italy and on their Italian catalogue. And because I'm not a sci-fi fan by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, I'm not a fan of Star Trek, I'm not a fan of Star Wars, but for some very strange reason, I absolutely love Doctor Who. And that's what some of my Trekkie friends and Star Wars friends like, what is wrong with you? You know, but I just can't get into it. But yeah, so basically at the time I knew of Doctor Who, but like I said, TV wise, it just wasn't a thing in Italy.
That is very interesting. Yeah, Chrissy said a British show that's too British. Yeah, well, and that, you know, in a way that's kind of appropriate, because when the idea was brought to do this movie, they knew that it needed to work for both the BBC and the Americans. So it was this whole, you know, planning together with people from the BBC and Fox and Universal, and you know, all of this.
A lot of cooks in the kitchen, as they say.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why I think the movie suffers from a lot of problems, which we will get to.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. We will get to that.
Yeah. So they hire this director, Jeffrey Sachs, who is the director, and then the writer of the script, Matthew Jacobs, was probably still is a huge Doctor Who fan. He's a Brit himself. So actually, I have the book version of the script of the film that I picked up actually at Who North America some trip ago. So this is not the novelization. There is a novelization of the film, which the story differs slightly from what we got in the movie, but we can discuss that too. But yeah, this is the...
I found the novelization and I lost it, unfortunately.
Yeah, so this is the finalized script used throughout filming. How even then there may be changes because of editing and all that, which is the case, although it does follow pretty closely to what we ended up with. But yeah, so there's an introduction in the book that's written by Matthew Jacobs, who has the writing credit for the script. Or no, the introduction is written by Philip Siegel, but he's talking about Matthew Jacobs. And when they were talking about when he first met Matthew, and talking about why the Doctor is such a beloved character, and apparently Matthew Jacobs' father, Anthony Jacobs, was in he played Doc Holliday in The Gunfighters.
Really?
Yes.
That's neat.
Again, Britain, 5 actors and 2 rock quarries.
Yes, exactly.
And well, you know, we joke, but you know, and then you talk about how, you know, this was his father and all that. It's, you know, it kind of goes generationally. I've noticed is a lot of, you know, actors who are like, oh, you know, my parents were, you know, into this, and I got into it, and so it's, yeah, so definitely seems like it's a generational thing over there, and a little bit here too. But I think it's just because Britain has a smaller pool of actors that, you know, we're like, oh, you're related to so and so and so and so and all this other.
Yeah, they kind of keep it in the family for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, oh, we've got you know, Derek Jacobi, and it's like, oh, you know, let's use his cousin's dog walker.
But that's also another reason why I want Sean Pertwee to finally play his father someday.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I've seen, I mean, I'm sure it's gone around, but there's that picture from a couple of Halloweens ago of him dressed up as the Third Doctor, and I'm like, holy crap, it's John Pertwee. What are you doing?
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
So,
He looks and sounds quite like, holy cow.
Yeah. So when they were discussing the script, they had this idea that it needed to be personal to the Doctor, dealing with the regeneration, putting him back on Earth, because that would help, according to Philip Siegel, it would help them ultimately define the Doctor's world to the uninitiated in a much more understandable way. And that's why they also came up with the idea of using the Master and none of the other monsters apart from that brief Dalek quote unquote cameo at the
that blink and you'll miss it.
Yeah, the Daleks sound absolutely nothing like Daleks are supposed to sound like.
Which let's talk about that for a second, with them wanting to expand on the Doctor, or go initiate the uninitiated, as it were. Because when I first saw the TV movie, it was after I'd watched New Who, but I hadn't watched any of classic Who, although I might have watched the 5 Doctors. I'm not sure by then. But by then I had heard about the TV movie, that it was all Americanized and it was crap and it was horrible, and I was a little nervous about this. And that first little bit, it felt like there's that little narration from the 8th Doctor at the beginning about the Master being on trial in Skaro and the Daleks and all that, and I was like, okay, this is weird, where are you going with this? But if you don't know what's going on, if you've never heard of Doctor Who, or even if you only know it in passing, I don't think it would really mean anything to you, especially as the story goes on. It doesn't, other than the Master, it never comes back up again. And even with the Master, it's weird. It's like, so he's this weird gooey snake thing who can take over people's bodies, which okay, that kind of happened back in like Keeper of Traken and Logopolis, but again, you don't really connect those things, and so it's sort of like this was a good idea, just poorly executed, even though the fans are like, oh, I know what that is. Oh, it's a I want to say it's like South Park has a saying, it's called member berries. It's like, remember this, and then they don't do anything with it.
Chrissy makes a very good point also, because I find the Daleks sound more like the paranoid android for some very strange reason. And secondly, why spend $32,000 and give them to Terry Nation to use the Daleks for 2 minutes, not even, and you don't even do them properly? And to add to what you were saying, Chrissy, I think they were hitting the uninitiated over the head with too much information. Skaro, Daleks, Rassilon, the sonic screwdriver. I think it was just overkill.
Yeah, and I think probably what they, it's easy to say this, 20 or I guess we're up to 20 years now and change. So much further into the future, but at the time it's kind of like, you had that gorgeous TARDIS set. If
which
you
cost
really
$1 million.
I know, it's like, make that your big, this Doctor, he's an alien and he has a spaceship that looks like a police box, but on the inside it's this gorgeous cathedral looking thing, and that's what you hit them with, instead of just blah 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 Skaro, blah 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 Master Rassilon, blah blah blah. They're like, wait a minute, what? Pause that, go back, I missed that, what was that? And it doesn't even mean anything in the story.
It was way too much. But even the regeneration thing, I think, could have thrown people off who didn't know what the heck was going on. I've heard interviews with Paul McGann and Sylvester McCoy about this from time to time, where they'd say, because Paul McGann, he was the one advertised as the Doctor and all the marketing and the lead up to it. But then you start with, Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor, and like, well, who's this guy? And so again, you're confusing people. You're kind of you're getting out in the weeds, and maybe you're trying to appease the hardcore fans, which is great, but there's got to be a balance to it, because by the time the 8th Doctor actually does show up, people are so confused and so lost, and
And at this point, where Doctor Who's been off the air for so long, for 7 years already, you just needed to. I feel like all the mistakes the TV movie made, Russell T Davies and company learned from that and said, okay, we're not going to do that when we when they restart the show with the 9th Doctor. It's like, we're just going to start fresh, and that's what they did. So I kind of feel like with the TV movie, they got all the mistakes, all the fanboy stuff, all that out of their system, and then they can start fresh with the new series. Now, at the time, of course, fans didn't know that was happening. This is all with the benefit of hindsight. I'm looking at it like a historian.
Yeah.
Looking at it because.
Yeah. Because at this point, it's still going to be almost another
9 years,
decade before Doctor Who as a TV series comes back.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Although this I do also feel like this kind of paved the way for Big Finish to really get going.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, well, yeah, we had the TV movie that failed. Well, we're going to go in this direction.
Yeah.
Have Doctor Who in audio because it's never coming back on TV.
Yeah. And we'll discuss at least Big Finish and
right
to this and the bigger continuity and all that. We obviously we've mentioned before we need to do a episode just purely dedicated to Big Finish.
Yes,
for the uninitiated.
Nice.
So Nick, you may need to come back for that.
Given the scope of,
you in.
Given the scope of Big Finish, it might be several episodes.
Yeah. Well, an introduction to Big Finish, like the history and
right.
to start in that.
Big Finish 101.
Yes, Big Finish 101. So, but we will
we'll
discuss some Big Finish.
We'll table that for now, but
yeah.
It's. I'm kind of all over the place when I'm talking about the TV movie because I want to talk about it as the story. I want to talk about it as how it brought about and it's sort of its legacy. So yeah, I get talking about it. And
well, I mean, it has to. I mean, it's like for some people they're like, why are they jumping all over the place? And like, well, just because of the nature of this story. And this movie, it just the whole thing. It was like in the grand scheme of things, we're grateful that it happened.
Totally.
But if things had gone slightly differently, the Doctor Who that we know and love would not exist.
Yeah. So
it's not that it happened, but also the way that it happened. Mm-hmm. Because it was such a failure, quote unquote, for the American audience. It did really well in the UK, actually. Like ratings wise, it was like one of the highest rated Doctor Who stories in the history of Doctor Who.
Well,
when it aired in the UK, although some of that I don't want to say helped, but Doctor Who may have been on people's minds because John Pertwee actually died the week before it aired in the UK. So it may have been kind of in the forefront of people's minds there anyway, but it bombed in the US.
Rachel, do you know also another reason why it bombed? Because on the same night it aired, you had a key episode of Roseanne at the same time, which was the wedding, which was huge.
Yeah,
and
it was also... That was also the series finale, and Roseanne at the time, that was
huge.
Big, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Everybody watched that show.
And so you were competing against Roseanne. It was kind of like, I guess, when The Simpsons were starting out and they were competing against The Cosby Show.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good comparison there. And so so Fox, in their infinite wisdom, and we could talk about Fox and their missteps all day long. They were like, they had this thing of like, well, we're just going to schedule it against here because I don't know, something's got to go there, and we're probably going to not get anything anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And just the finale of Roseanne happened to be playing there, so you're like, oh yeah, probably not the smartest decision.
Yeah. Or they just like, well, we just need something to fill in the time. This weird little thing that we said we were gonna do, sure, put it in there.
Yeah.
That they probably didn't have much confidence in anyway.
Yeah. Well, and when it came to once they got their script or some version of a script, it came down to casting. And some of the folks from the BBC actually wanted Tom Baker to come back and somehow factor his doctor into it, which would make no sense with the script that we got. But it's because his doctor was is considered one of the most familiar to American audiences, because when they started, once Doctor Who was brought over to the United States, they started with the Fourth Doctor.
Yeah. And
so
that's why
a lot of people that are old enough to remember when Doctor Who first started airing, Tom is the first Doctor they remember seeing. So the BBC was like, well, he's the most recognizable to the Americans, let's use Tom Baker. But Philip Siegel was like, no, it needs to be Sylvester McCoy, at least the beginning, because the Seventh Doctor didn't really get a proper send-off, because when they were in production with the last season, they didn't know that Doctor Who was going to be canceled, and that's why if you watch the very last episode, Survival, you get that ADR line of Sylvester's Doctor talking to Ace. It's like
somewhere the tea is getting
somewhere
cold.
the tea is getting cold. And that was it. So they wanted Philip Siegel at least wanted Sylvester McCoy to come back so that he could regenerate, so that we could get that regeneration. But the people from the BBC were like, no, because in their minds, Sylvester's Doctor was associated with the end of Who.
True.
So it's like, oh, bad juju there. But eventually,
well, and again, it goes back.
His Siegel got what he wanted, but it was in the agreement that Sylvester was only in it for a very short time and didn't say anything. Although he does end up saying a few lines, but
yeah, he has a few lines, and again, that goes back to that whole fanboy thing. It's like I'm not disparaging fanboys. I don't mean it that way, but I mean like, you've got to get the production going. You've got to get a foot in the door. You've got to get people liking this thing and not just have it be this little niche property. If you want to get more episodes, yes, it would be great to have that regeneration, and we got it, but again, you're confusing the people who have no idea what this is, who are just flipping channels and like, well, maybe they're not interested in the Roseanne finale. Well, what's Fox got going on? I don't get this. And so they click off, or even if they do finish watching it, they're like, that was the dumbest blah 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 thing, whatever.
Yeah So it's like, they finally get the agreement that Sylvester McCoy is going to come back and he's going to get a regeneration so that we can get a new Doctor. So then comes the part where they're like, okay, who's going to play the Doctor? And of course the Americans, like Universal and Fox, are like, we need a big American name, someone who's going to be recognizable to the people. And some of the names
oh my gosh, this list
that have supposedly been thrown around, some of them are like, I could have kind of seen that. It's not all Americans, but there are some big names that were thrown around, including Dan Aykroyd.
Oh my.
Not Bakula, which would have been interesting considering he had his own time travel television show.
Yeah. Oh boy.
This list, we could probably take a lot of these names and put in our actor in a hat.
Yeah, some of them are actually.
Yeah. Hey, a lot of them already are.
Yeah.
I see a few that we have done already.
Yeah, Jim Belushi, David Bowie, which I think Bowie, it's a shame that Bowie's no longer with us, because he should have been in Doctor Who in some capacity during his time. Dana Carvey.
Wow. For the Master, for the Doctor?
For the Doctor. No, for the Master. These are potential names for the Master. But even then, some of them are, it's like really? Yeah, Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. Jonathan Frakes.
Wow.
Okay.
Jeff Goldblum.
Of course,
Timothy Hutton, jumpstart to Mastermind from Leverage.
Yeah. Now Rutger Hauer being on this list, I actually feel like that was a missed opportunity.
Because he played a good baddie in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and he's the antagonist in Blade Runner and Lady Hawk. Lady Hawk. He's actually the hero in that one. And he's great.
That's right.
But he's one of those. He was one of those kind of dark horse actors that you're like, you hear the name and you don't know who he is, but then you start listing off things he's been in, like, oh, that guy.
Yeah.
He passed away not too long ago, but yeah, I'm like looking at that and I'm like, oh man, that would have been great.
Yeah. Christopher Lee, I think he would have made a great master.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that man can read the phone book to me, but sadly he can't anymore. Which is very sad.
I know.
Yeah. Patrick Stewart.
Oh, yeah.
Mick Jagger? Oh,
yeah, Mick Jagger.
That is bad.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. This list is all on IMDb in the trivia section, so you can go and read the entire list. We're not going to do the entire thing.
It's huge. We'd sit here and be like,
At one point, Barusa as a character was going to appear, and names tossed around included Richard Attenborough, which, Peter Cushing, who ended up being his own version of the Doctor, depending on how you want to look at it, Kirk Douglas, Sir Alec Guinness, which that would have been fun.
That would have been fun.
Anthony Hopkins. Again, Christopher Lee. It's like, let's just throw Christopher Lee in for everything.
I wouldn't complain.
Yeah. Paul Newman. Peter O'Toole, speaking of Lawrence Arabia.
Yeah. Max von Sydow.
Yeah.
Oh, Ming.
Yeah.
Good to see Ming as the master. That would have been nice.
Yeah. Peter O'Toole was actually the favorite, but apparently he said he wasn't interested.
Darn it.
Which then obviously Barusa doesn't appear in the story anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Although Gregory Peck's on this list, I would have loved that one.
Oh yeah.
Those old classic actors. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah. For the role of Grace, they included names like Helen Hunt, Jodie Benson. We've got a couple of Disney princesses on here: Jodie Benson and Paige O'Hara.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, okay, because you know them as voice actresses, which I mean they're wonderful, but I've never seen them. Yeah. Other than I guess I've seen they made cameos in Enchanted, but that was a Disney princess thing, so it was kind of an in joke. That's the only time I've seen them do any kind of live action anything.
Yeah, and then as far as the Doctor, Fox and Universal Studios' top choices were Tom Hanks, Harrison Ford, or Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey would have been absolutely terrible. I mean, I used to have to rewatch Batman Forever, and I could see him doing.
Oh gosh. I mean, 90s Jim Carrey is great doing 90s Jim Carrey things.
Yes.
90s Jim Carrey as the Doctor in Doctor Who. No.
No.
Now, Tom Hanks is a fan, but he felt that an American playing the role wouldn't do the show's legacy justice. Ford turned it down because he didn't want to work in TV, because if this had been successful, whoever played the Doctor would have had to commit to doing a TV series. And then Jim Carrey had never seen Doctor Who, but he still turned down the role because he felt it would cause outrage amongst Doctor Who fans if the role was played by someone who wasn't a fan themselves. Which
fair enough
is true.
Smart guy.
So this is down to the executives just not knowing what they were doing.
Yeah. Thankfully, the people that they approached were smart enough to realize the importance of this, even if they weren't fans themselves, which is good. So once they just realized that, okay, it's not going to be an American, it's going to be a Brit, they still had to band around a few names and people before we got our Doctor, including people like Christopher Eccleston, who would go on to play the Ninth Doctor.
I was going to say, I can see him playing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see him playing a Doctor.
A Doctor.
Yeah, I think he'd be absolute crap.
This wouldn't fit the role. Yeah.
But at the time, he felt he wasn't an established enough actor and didn't want to be associated with a brand name so early in his career, which we saw how that worked out. That would probably explain that still is kind of Chris's thing. Let's see, who else? Peter Capaldi.
Oh, I'm sure he was like, "Ooh, they're doing a Doctor Who movie. Pick me."
Yeah.
He's been a fan since he was a little kid.
Oh, yeah. They asked him to audition, but he did decline it because he felt it was unlikely he would be given the part.
In hindsight, that's hilarious.
Yeah,
that is so funny.
He became the Doctor when he was supposed to.
Yes, this is true. Oh my gosh, Peter, I love that man. He needs to come to a convention that I can get to so I can just meet him and hug him.
Yeah. And actually someone who did audition but didn't get the role is Mark McGann, Paul's brother.
Wow.
I remember hearing that story. Because Paul was talking about it one of the Big Finish interview, behind the scenes interview things, and that he mentioned his brother had auditioned but didn't get it.
Yeah. And obviously we got Eric Roberts as the Master, although at one point Christopher Lloyd was actually being considered to play the Master, but he was but Universal apparently thought he was too expensive, so they cast Eric Roberts, who ended up actually costing more than Christopher Lloyd.
Oh boy.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Could you have seen Christopher Walken as the Master?
No.
I would be willing to give him a shot just to see what he would do. But it would be a train wreck, I think.
Yeah. Just, no offense to Christopher Walken. But
it's one of those train wrecks that I kind of want to see.
That's more in the vein of Curse of the Fatal Death.
Yes. I was just about to say that. Like, do it as a
That's
YouTube
a very Red Nose Day
thing. Yeah, a Red Nose Day for charity or something like that. But yeah, like all these names, I'm like, I just want to see how they would do it. Like, just do a little sketch.
Yeah.
For my entertainment purely.
Yes.
A series of screen tests. Yeah, give us a series of screen tests. That would be fun.
Yeah.
That will never see the light of day.
Yeah.
For
So we'll
20 years.
We'll just imagine it.
Yeah. So after all of that, we finally have our cast. So we're gonna have Sylvester McCoy come back as the 7th iteration of the Doctor, so he can regenerate into the 8th Doctor, played by Paul McGann. We're gonna have Eric Roberts as the Master, Daphne Ashbrook, our American, as Dr. Grace Holloway, Yi Ji So as Chang Li. That's essentially our main cast. So now that we've got all our players in place, we can talk about the movie and the plot itself. So, set in San Francisco, New Year's Eve, 1999, on the verge of flipping over into new millennia, the Doctor finds himself shot by a gang and forced to regenerate under very horrific circumstances, actually. It's been a long time since I watched this movie, and I'd forgotten just like kind of how dark. I mean, it's not grotesque by any means, but Sylvester McCoy's acting as his Doctor is dying on the operating table, it's kind of brutal to watch.
As you were describing kind of the setup here, I'm like, is there anything more 90s than looking forward to the year 2000, the new millennium, the gritty, mean streets of San Francisco, which, watching this thing, every time I see it, I'm like, this looks like the Ninja Turtles movie.
Little bit. I've been to Chinatown in San Francisco, and although this wasn't filmed in San Francisco, it was actually filmed in Canada because that's what they do. But still, I've been to the actual Chinatown in San Francisco, and granted, I went in the daytime, but still, it's nothing like what is portrayed in here.
Yeah,
at least the parts that I went to.
Yeah, but yeah, every time I watch him, like, this looks like the Ninja Turtles movie,
Yeah.
and you know the whole. I don't even know what to call it, but you know him being rushed to the hospital and dying on the operating table and waking up in the morgue. I'm like, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I was like 11 in '96. I'm trying to remember like what. Like maybe ER or something at the time.
Probably, yeah.
But that, you know, those were all big things. Like all these beats, I'm like, this is such a time capsule. Not that Classic Who, the other Classic Who episodes aren't a time capsule, but maybe it's because this is partially an American production, and these are things that I'm familiar with personally from my, from my childhood at the time. It is just kind of disjointing to see all these things associated with Doctor Who.
Yeah.
All of a sudden,
it is very time capsule-y. One of the things I wrote down as I was watching it is, other than the opening sequence where we get the Doctor Who theme, which we weren't going to get at first because they didn't have the rights for it, and actually Alan Menken, speaking of Disney princesses, was going to write a new theme. But then they got the rights to the actual Doctor Who theme, so they were able to keep that. Although even this version is very different. It's more orchestrated, like the piano bit. It's definitely a distinct.
It's a lot more bombastic.
It's very grandiose. I actually really like it.
Yeah, I do too. But then the rest of the music, your incidental music, is so 90s.
Oh,
it is so 90s.
I was actually expecting the Batmobile to pull up at some in the sky.
Yes,
something. Yeah, it's like the Batmobile, the Ninja Turtles to pop out of a sewer somewhere, and be like, "Hey, dude, what's going on?" You know.
Exactly.
Hey, let's put these jelly babies on some pizza and see how it tastes.
Yeah.
Speaking of crossovers.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you're a Doctor Who fan, obviously, and a fan of Classic Who, and we discussed this when we talked about this last season of Doctor Who, when they brought the Master back, is it does check a lot of those boxes for a Master story, though. You've got the Master cocking up some, cockamamie plan to try and kill the Doctor, and his own arrogance ends up getting in the way, and he gets defeated. It's like, it's a classic Master story.
It really is.
It is.
Now, going back to when I first watched this, and some of the things I'd heard up until that point, like I'd heard people complain, oh, they got this terrible American actor to play the Master, and why did they do that? Oh, but then you actually watch the story, and it's like, well, the Master, they land in San Francisco. The Master needs to, possess a new body, and he can't get to the Doctor. Well, of course he would possess an American guy. It was
makes sense.
So that part in the story
makes sense. It's not the first time he's possessed a body. Hello,
yes,
back to Captain.
Yep, right.
Yeah, it is exactly. And like you said, it is kind of a classic Master trope story. And if you look at it that way, it's kind of enjoyable. I mean, there are a lot of things that you just kind of have to say, well, they tried, but but as far as like the Master and Eric Roberts' portrayal, I mean, say what you want about the guy. I think he kind of got it.
I think so too.
He got the essence of the Master, because the Master is kind of a nut.
You can see shades of Ainsley and Delgado in his portrayal of the Master.
I think he also influenced John Sim as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
I agree. And I think, maybe where, John Sim and probably even Michelle Gomez to a point have probably looked back at all the different portrayals of the Master and have picked out some parts to incorporate into their performances. And maybe that's part of why, like, we're looking back at this, like, okay, yeah, that portrayal is actually kind of fun and kind of, and it fits. Whereas maybe at the time, people just kind of weren't getting their heads wrapped around it quite as much.
Yeah. And people say Sacha Dhawan is over the top. Seriously.
Yeah. He is, but it's a fabulous over the top.
Over the top.
Not Sacha Dhawan. I mean, come on now.
Now, is it?
His Master and his Master would get along well.
I want to see him like have a scenery chewing Face Off or something and just, sell tickets.
We have a multi-doctor stories. Come on, let's get some multi-master.
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting that Big Finish.
Yeah.
True. I mean, on screen.
Well, yes.
I mean, it's a little sad that Sacha Dhawan isn't involved in Big Finish yet because they don't have the rights to what's on TV currently, because that would kind of be fun.
Yeah. He's fantastic. He's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it's a pretty kind of straightforward story. Is we get a regeneration, which anytime the Doctor regenerates, it's a mess. And it seems to be that as we've seen with all the Doctor's regenerations that we've seen on screen, that the circumstances surrounding the regeneration obviously have an effect on who the Doctor regenerates into. But then I also think that the circumstances that cause the regeneration also have an impact on how the regeneration comes out, who the Doctor becomes next, but also the regeneration itself.
Da Vinci. He had a cold when he drew that.
You're still fibrillating badly.
No, I'm not. Here. I remember! I was with Pacini before he died.
Name drop.
I was.
Shh. Oh my God.
You say that's no echo. He died before he could finish Turando. Alfano finished it based on his notes. It was so sad.
You have 2 hearts. Who are you?
I was dead too long this time. The anesthetic almost destroyed the regenerative process.
Yeah. Right. I'm gonna get a syringe. I'm gonna take some blood. I want to know what's going on.
Grace. Don't you see? I have 13 lives.
Please. Okay, you're trying to tell me that you've come back from the dead.
Yes.
No, sorry. The dead stay dead. You can't turn back time.
Yes, you can.
I'm not a child. Don't talk to me like I'm a child. Only children believe that crap. I am a doctor.
But it was a childish dream that made you a doctor. You dreamt you could hold back death. Isn't that true? Don't be sad, Grace. You'll do great things.
The act of regeneration itself, like we've seen where the Doctor is regenerated because he's gotten old. The first Doctor did that, wearing a bit thin. The War Doctor did that, where he just, the body wore out. But then you have someone like Tennant's Doctor who held off regeneration, and that regeneration became very violent, causing the TARDIS to crash. The library ends up in the swimming pool. And you end up with this kind of crazy Doctor that we got with Matt Smith, who's just kind of all over the place. But then you get Matt Smith's Doctor who regenerates. He knows he's going to regenerate. He's fully embracing the fact that he's going to regenerate. So when he regenerates into Capaldi's Doctor, it's boom. Because he doesn't hold it back. But then Capaldi's Doctor holds it off. And we get another violent regeneration. The TARDIS crashes. But then we get Jodie's Doctor, who is kind of a little out there, kind of like Matt Smith's Doctor. So we get this Doctor. So, the 7th Doctor, he gets shot.
Yeah. And my thing is after watching as much Doctor Who, where was the temporal grace? Where was the cloister bells going off saying, don't go outside?
It's like, why didn't you hear the shooting that was going on outside the TARDIS door? Like,
right.
They hit the
red
alert
scanner
before you open the door.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a rather undignified end for Sylvester McCoy. Let's be honest. I mean, the doctor
he deserved better.
Everything, and he gets shot in the street like a dog. Come on.
Yeah.
He deserved better.
Now, in my head canon. Now, I don't know if you've listened to the Sixth Doctor, the Last Adventure from Big Finish.
I refuse. I'm like Colin Baker. If I never hear it, it never happened.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but I'm going to kind of tap dance around a little bit. So basically, because the Sixth Doctor got kind of a short end
of the stick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got kind of a bad rap with his regeneration. So Big Finish went in and made it more palatable, I guess. Kind of extended the adventure, and that what we saw on screen was just kind of one little speck of the greater picture of what was going on. And that was, and so it was more of a mental thing, a mental battle going on. So part of me wonders, like, I wonder if the Seventh Doctor was actually, in this whole big, taking the Master back to Gallifrey to be imprisoned because he was on trial in Scarrow, whatever. Like, if there was more to it than that, and we just saw the tail end of it, and maybe the Seventh Doctor was kind of more, okay, yeah, this is my time, this is where I'm gonna go, and this is how I'm gonna do it because I said so.
Yeah.
I'm like, I wonder if there was some kind of, a grander thing going on that we just didn't see, like what they did with the Sixth Doctor for Big Finish. I'm going to choose to believe it.
Or Barusa decided to set him up and like, we're done with you. Let's just bye-bye.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah. You might be onto something, Chrissy. We'll talk about that when we talk about like the bigger continuity.
I know. Well,
you may possibly be onto something, depending on what the extended media you consume. So we'll get to that.
We're Doctor Who fans. We consume it all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may take us a while, but we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you kind of have to wonder if if they had realized that the Doctor was not human, had two hearts, and treated him accordingly, would he have regenerated in the first place? Because as far as the what medical babble we get, nothing major was hit. He got hit in the leg and in the shoulder.
Yeah. That's why I say it's so undignified the way he goes out. And actually, to tie into that, can we actually please address the fact of the Doctor being half human in this film?
Oh, yeah. We'll discuss that.
Yeah.
we will get there. Oh,
yes. Oh, yeah. But obviously, they had to give a reason for the Doctor to regenerate so that we could get Paul McGann as the Doctor, for better for worse. But then, regeneration, and this Doctor specifically, once you get into Big Finish, you'll realize that Paul McGann's Doctor suffers from amnesia a lot.
It's kind of like, and same with some of the novels that he's in. It's kind of like the writers of those, they like, they consult the TV movie to get a sense of his personality, and you're kind of like, oh, he has amnesia, that's what he is. And it's like, well, yeah, that's post-regeneration sickness, but there's more to him than that.
It's almost like he's kind of Rupert Giles, and then there's this invisible book or invisible demon that just kind of whaps him upside the head, and I don't know who I am and what I'm supposed to be doing. Help.
So he's got amnesia. He can't remember who he is. He doesn't, he before the Doctor had been shot and regenerated, the Master, whose remains, quote unquote remains, he was supposedly taking back to Gallifrey, which was the Master's last request on death row before he was executed by the Daleks.
And you think they would have put a deadlock seal on the thing that they had him in? I
don't think it would have mattered.
True. That's the Master.
The bits of the Master managed to escape, like he does, and causes the the TARDIS to malfunction, and the Doctor's forced to land in San Francisco on New Year's Eve, essentially. So, and then that bits in the Master because it needs a body that is appropriate, but he can't get to the Doctor's body because obviously he needs a Gallifreyan Time Lord body, preferably with 2 hearts and all that fun stuff. But in the meantime, he takes over the body of this ambulance driver, played by Eric Roberts, which is how he ends up becoming the Master. And of course, there's this race against time because if the Doctor can't get the TARDIS fixed, then reality is going to implode on itself or something. It's timey-wimey. So, yeah, so the plot is not anything extravagant as far as Doctor Who is concerned. It's definitely leaned more towards classic Who, where the plot lines were simpler, I think, compared to now, where, you know, especially with this, what happened in this last season, where it's like, oh, the timeless child, and no, the Doctor's got all these regenerations before, which that may end up tying into this, or they tie this into that. We don't know yet, but the plot is very straightforward. I mean, like I said, I've got the book version of the script. It's 126 pages. It's not long at all. There's not a lot to it.
Yeah,
it's pretty much a straightforward action movie, I suppose. You have to save the world from being destroyed. It's as simple as that.
Pretty much with the whole with you know some Doctor Who flavor text thrown in there just to call it Doctor Who, I guess. But yeah, like I don't know, I kind of it started making me think of, you know, how classic Who is structured versus how new Who is structured. I mean, the structure is very different because classic Who, several episodes are one story, whereas new Who, you have one about 45-minute episode, maybe 2 for a 2-parter, and then there's your story. Whereas this being a movie, and again, you know, they were really trying to appeal to as many people as possible, while also appealing to the fans and appealing to, you know, just everything, trying to throw everything in there to make it work. It's like they wanted it to be a simple story, but with all of the big action set pieces, like, you know, the motorcycle chase and the big climax at the end in the TARDIS in the Eye of Harmony and all this stuff. So it kind of feels like, again, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, a lot of people trying to do a lot of different things all at once. But yeah, at its core, it is just sort of it's a simple adventure story with all these little fripperies hanging off the edge. Yeah, with him distracting the guy with the jelly baby or whatever else they have going on.
Jelly babies are awesome.
Oh, they very much are. Yes. Indeed.
And every time that the Doctor has one, it's always either eats one himself or when he offers one, it's a yellow one, and that's because the Doctor knows that the yellow ones are one of the best ones. Yellow and orange, those are the best ones.
I haven't had one in a long time. I mean,
but yeah, no, yeah, Chrissy, you're right that they it obviously is like generic enough that it caters to a broad audience, but they do make sure to put like some of those things that we've come to recognize as quintessential to Doctor Who. So it's like the TARDIS, she's the blue box that we expect. You know, it's obviously bigger on the inside. Chang Lee has his bigger on the inside moment because you have to have that. The jelly babies, you know, those sort of things are very quintessential Who.
And the appearance of the sonic screwdriver as well for a brief period as well.
And we all stopped to say, like, wait a minute, when did he get that back?
Exactly.
Yeah. This is like, how long has that been cooking away?
I know. I
he just had in the bag, along with a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. I have some questions for the TARDIS, because after the Fifth Doctor lost it, I'm like, now why did it take you so long? If it's, but that's for another episode.
And where are the extra hidden spare reserves of Nitro 9? I mean, you got to think that Ace probably planted some somewhere in the TARDIS for the Doctor in case he would need it.
Yeah.
Well, then also the Eye of Harmony being there where it is, was it was actually on Gallifrey last time we checked.
Right. Although, well, part of me, I've kind of started subscribing to the theory that there's the main Eye of Harmony, and then the TARDISes out to have their little branched off Eye of Harmony. Like, this is your little piece of it if you can't get to the big one, or this one, when you need it. But so you have your little portable version. That's how I hand wave that one.
Yeah.
I don't know how widely that anything like that's accepted, but
yeah. Well,
it works.
I mean, Nick is right that the Eye of Harmony is supposed to be on Gallifrey. They established that in the Deadly Assassin.
Yeah.
Yes. I realize that.
But then the episode Journey to the Center of the TARDIS actually corroborates that the Eye of Harmony is in the TARDIS. But yeah. That's its own that's its own thing. And I guess we could kind of use that as our segue into the things that this movie established, and they
unquote
now had quote unquote established, and have now had to retcon, for lack of a better term, in the last almost 20 years. More than 20 years, almost 30 years, 5 years and some change. So yeah, we'll start with the Eye of Harmony. So the Eye of Harmony is supposed to be the power source for which all the Time Lords use to travel through time. And it is you can get into Time Lord history. It was created by Rassilon by suspending time around an exploding star in the act of becoming a black hole, harnessing the potential energy of that collapse. It uses all the Artron energy, which we know about. But yeah, it's supposed to be on Gallifrey, how the Eye ended up in the Doctor's specific TARDIS is whether that's the actual Eye itself, or like what Chrissy was saying, like it's almost like a link.
Yeah, like an extension.
Almost like the Eye of Harmony is like a cell phone tower, and the eye that's in all the TARDISes is kind of, like the receptor antenna type thing. Maybe, possibly.
It's going at it from the perspective of how they wrote the story. Again, this one feels like, hey, the Eye of Harmony, that's a thing from Doctor Who, let's throw that in there. You're not really understanding what it really is supposed to be, but it's like, hey, that's a cool name for something that we want to have a callback to, even if it throws continuity all to pieces. Anyway,
very well said. And the fact that it can only be opened by human eyes, I mean, come on now.
Okay, yeah, that one's weird. The whole oh gosh, the human thing.
That's, I suppose, why they made the Doctor half human and why he needed the Doctor's body. I mean, I suppose it's a plot device, but still, it probably would have made more sense for it to be opened by Gallifreyan eyes rather than human eyes.
It is a weird choice. It is a weird choice for them to say, it's going to open by human eyes so we can blind Grace. And I'm like, okay, this climax, it drives me crazy every time I watch it. I love the TV movie, don't get me wrong. But when I see the climax and that whole fight around the thing and the Doctor yelling things and Grace gets blinded and the Doctor has to yell to her, your sight will return, and all these really hokey, cheesy, over the top things that they're doing, I'm like, you guys, you could have written this so much better. It's like, and you throw in all these things that don't need to be there. Now, it doesn't make me upset as much as I realize like my tone is making it sound. But the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, why did you do that?
Yeah. And they have tried to retcon that sense. There's a novel that there's a novel called The Quantum Archangel that, according to it, all TARDISes built after a certain point, including the Type 40s, have a mathematically modeled duplicate of the eye in them. Although in the novelization for the movie, the Master explains that the Eye of Harmony inside the Doctor's TARDIS is merely named after the actual Eye of Harmony that's on Gallifrey. So,
unless he's just trying to do that as a cover to get, you know, Yiji to do whatever he needs him to. Like, you don't need to know this much. Just blanket, simple.
Yeah.
Do what I ask.
Yeah. Again, it depends on what you know, one novel says one thing, the novelization for the movie says something else. So
it's like the virologists on COVID-19. Everybody tells you something different.
There are no experts. They're just everybody guessing at everything else.
And certain points of view.
Now there was one thing that I was just thinking of, is because Nick, you mentioned the deadly assassin with some of these things that get brought up. Several years ago, and I don't think the podcast exists anymore because it was a video podcast. It was the Minute Doctor Who podcast, and I don't know if you ever watched that one. The guy who did it, his name was Luke, big Doctor Who fan, obviously. A few years ago, when they had that Sarah Jane Adventures episode where Russell T Davies was trying to insert more regenerations because the Doctor shows up and Clyde asks him, like, how many times can you regenerate? And he just throws off a huge number flippantly. And it kind of sent the fandom into a tizzy. And so Luke starts on his podcast, and I could probably find the video and link to it. He kind of puts forth this thing like, you know, the number was established in The Deadly Assassin as 12, and he's like, but there were other attempts before that and since to mitigate that a little bit, and he was like, well, why do we cling on to this one number that has been, when in other episodes they talk about it, and it's like, well, it's because, and kind of his theory put forth is like, well, because this episode gets watched a lot, so people take that as canon, as continuity. So I kind of wonder with like the whole half human thing, if because, you know, the TV movie is the one time we got the Eighth Doctor on screen, other than at least one exception, which we'll get to, but people watched it over and over, and so, you know, they hear that half human line, it's a plot point in the story, so it's like, well, now we have to explain this away, whereas maybe if it had been in a different episode, it wasn't as heavily rewatched by a lot of fans, would we have just ignored it anyway? So I don't know. That's just kind of.
The thing is, I actually had brought up that point of the multiple regenerations in that Sarah Jane episode on Next Stop Everywhere, which is a fantastic podcast, which I actually wanted to plug our good friends Charles and Jesse Jackson who do. And I actually was on there to discuss the latest series of Doctor Who and the fact of the Timeless Child and such, and the fact that I thought that Sarah Jane episode was almost a testing ground for the fact of the Doctor being immortal in canon, as it were, and I thought it was maybe a testing ground for that. The half-human thing, interestingly, earlier we talked about the fact of Leonard Nimoy. I have a feeling it was done for the fact of the character of Spock has a double heritage because he is partly human, and he deals with that throughout the series, this kind of infighting within himself of which part do I feed, as it were, the two wolves inside me, the human side or the non-human or the Vulcan side. And I think being Spock such a popular character at the time, they wanted to do that with the Doctor as well. And plus, I think they wanted to make it more relatable to the audience, as in, this guy is an alien, but he's also half human. But the problem is, I think it actually falls completely flat when it comes to the Doctor, because you can still relate to him, even though he's an alien. You know, and I think that was the main reason. Also the fact of, it all ties into the fact of the Eye of Harmony being able to be opened by human eyes. And that's why, oh, the Doctor's half human, so I have to use him to open the Eye of Harmony. It was really, I was just so upset with that. And I think to myself, it's just like, why did you even do that? If they'd done it with Gallifreyan eyes, problem solved. It would have been way less of a bumpy ride, and it would have made more sense. But I suppose they had to put Grace in jeopardy because she's a human, and they had to blind her and yada, yada, yada. So I think that was probably why, but that's pretty much the way I see all that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I've always kind of just looked at it as the Doctor just said something just absolutely bonkers to that one guy so he could steal his pass, so that he would just be so distracted that he could steal his.
And I thought that too. And I'm that line. I'm willing to just kind of, throw that away. It's just the whole. Yeah. I have to use Grace's eyes to open the Eye of Harmony. But again, that whole climax is just totally bonkers anyway.
Yeah.
Just like, whatever.
And what have we said before? The Doctor lies to get what he needs sometimes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although
the problem is the Master confirms it, though. That's the big problem.
Yeah, that's the
sticking point.
And that's what I wanted to bring up is there's a comic book, Doctor Who comic called The Forgotten, that in it supposedly it retcons that the Doctor, the seventh Doctor, before he exits the TARDIS, uses the chameleon arch to make himself appear half human. To somehow, in his plan, to use it against the Master, but I have not read that comic, and I can't find anything that really explains in more detail how exactly the Doctor thought that was going to do anything.
But the fact that we have all these various things kind of retconning it evidently shows that there were so many holes in the story they needed to use all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's anyone out there that's read that particular comic, and it could specifically talk about that bit of because it's a 10th Doctor comic, but apparently it goes through the history of it covers all the Doctors' regenerations up through the 10th Doctor. But I can't find anything, at least with the research I did, that explains when it gets to the 7th Doctor why the 7th and 8th Doctor, why the Doctor potentially did that. Like, what was the plan? Like, because we know the chameleon arch, that you can chameleon arch yourself to make yourself appear completely human, and then the Doctor also in that process forgets exactly who they are, because we've seen that with the 10th Doctor, and we've seen that actually with the Master, with Professor Yana, and now Ruth, as this random iteration of the Doctor, that when chameleon arch to be completely human, the Doctor forgets, or whoever forgets who they are completely. So half human would make sure that the Doctor retain their memories while blending in better. I don't know. I like I said, I can't find anything that compounds upon that particular comic book to better explain it. So I don't know exactly what the Doctor's plan might have been, because I would think if he stayed full Gallifreyan, kept his Time Lord essence, then the Master can't use him to open the eye. But maybe if he was half human, that would save the humans he came across from being used by the master? I don't know. I'm spitballing here at this point.
Maybe I guess we can just write it up as a faux pas on part of the writers.
Yeah.
I'm willing to do that.
I'm just at the end of the day, it's just one of those. The doctor will just say the most redonkulous things that make no sense to us if it fits the circumstances.
Yeah.
So.
And you can sit there and try to triangulate and make it work and try to force it into continuity and canon, and it's just gonna make your head hurt. Yeah. So don't stress. Sit back and enjoy Paul McGann being the 8th Doctor, because oh my gosh, this man is brilliant.
Yes.
Yes. The best part in this movie. With all its problems, he's definitely the highlight of the film.
Yeah. Which, going into the legacy a little bit, he was so great that when Big Finish was starting to do their thing, they had asked Stephen Moffat to come write for them, and at the time they didn't have Paul McGann doing it, and Stephen Moffat said, well, no, I want to write for the 8th Doctor because he's the Doctor right now. So he never did it. He never did Big Finish. So, people were enamored with him, even if they weren't enamored. They were enamored with Paul McGann, even if they weren't enamored with the movie as a whole.
Well, he definitely got quite a, should we say, an upgrade also in the Big Finish stuff, because in fact...
Oh, of course. Yeah.
The Chimes of Midnight is one of my favorite Big Finish stories.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Mm-hmm. Yes. In fact, I actually have kind of a funny story about that. So my husband, one of his favorite TV miniseries is Our Mutual Friend, based on the Dickens novel. And when we were dating, he wanted to show it to me, and so I sat down and watched it. And like in the first couple of scenes, I hear this voice, and I'm like, "Holy crap! The 8th Doctor is in this!" And he's like, "What?" And so and it gets to it because you hear his voice before you see him, and then it pans around. And it's, he's playing, I can't remember the name of the character now, and it's going to bug me, and Jared's going to be so mad that I forgot the name of the character. But it's like, oh my gosh, it's the 8th Doctor with this beautiful mustache. And so it was so weird that we were doing that, and my husband was like, he hadn't heard any Big Finish at that point, so he's like, oh wow, because he's watched the miniseries a lot because it's his favorite, and he's like, well, I need to hear some Big Finish. I don't really know anything about the 8th Doctor. I mean, he's a big sci-fi guy. He's more Star Trek, but he watches, he'll watch Doctor Who with me. So we were going on a trip, and I put in some 8th Doctor Big Finish. And now he's just like, oh my gosh, the 8th Doctor, he needed to have his own series. Like, what is wrong with people? Eugene Rayburn, thank you. Yes. I was having such a brain fart. Yep. I knew the name because we rewatched it recently. But yeah, so my husband, I mean, I don't know if he'd seen the TV movie ever, or maybe he saw it once and didn't like it. But once I started having him listen to Big Finish, he was like, yeah, that's amazing. I need to listen to more. I'm like, well, here, I'll be your dealer. Yeah. But it was just, that's always just a funny story and it all involves Paul McGann.
Well, I mean, he is fantastic on Big Finish, and to add to the fact of the going forwards, what then happened in canon later on. I mean, here was the first time of our case of hanky panky in the TARDIS.
Well, first recorded instance. I'm not convinced Ian and Barbara didn't get up to some shenanigans back in the day.
I'm the Doctor with a companion, though.
Okay. You got that. That is true.
I mean, I think folks must have been really shocked at the time, because if you think about it, the Doctor is almost asexual prior to this. I mean, he never has a companion. He might flirt with them, but he never goes further than flirting. I mean, he surrounds himself with beautiful women and handsome men, but he never does anything.
It always feels like he's more interested in whatever adventure is going on than, it's more like, especially where humans are concerned, he wants to show us the universe, maybe, or not necessarily always Earthlings, but he wants to show his companions the universe, and it's not really about him. He's just the driver. But as long as he can show people what's going on. Now, obviously, that has changed quite a bit since New Who has started. But back in Classic Who, it was always about the adventure, and our main TARDIS team, they were just kind of the ones showing us the story. They were kind of more along for the ride. And you didn't get a lot of stories that were focused on the Doctor or focused on the companions, for better or worse. And we can that could be a different discussion for another time. But
this was the first kissing Doctor before David Tennant became the kissing Doctor.
Yeah. And then Matt Smith just kept it going. Heck, he married one of his companions.
Yeah. Yes. Then he kissed all of them. So
and he kissed all of them, even Rory. Yep. Rory got a big old snog.
Yep.
But yeah,
hey,
so
I kind of, I say the first kiss I kind of equate to the Doctor just being excited that he's finally getting some of his memories back.
Yeah.
Not bad. But these belong to...
Brian? Yep. Keep them.
Thank you. How's my blood?
It's not blood.
Perhaps if I walk in them, stretch them a bit, they'll fit me better.
Good idea. Let's go for a walk.
Maybe you're the result of some weird genetic experiment.
I don't think so.
But you have no recollection of family.
No, wait. I remember I'm with my father. We're lying back in the grass. It's a warm Gallifreyan night.
Gallifreyan?
Gallifrey! Yes, this must be where I live. Now, where is that?
I've never heard of it. What do you remember?
A meteor storm. The sky above us was dancing with lights. Purple, green, brilliant yellow. Yes!
What?
These shoes! They fit perfectly. Yes.
But again, it goes back to this being an action adventure sort of movie, and you know, you look at action movies of the 90s. I think of Speed, just kind of off the top of my head. Tom Cruise and Sandra Bullock's character, they're not really romantically involved, but by the end of the movie, they're making out on the tarmac out there, and it's just kind of like that's a trope from those movies. And so the producers are like, yeah, you got to have a kiss. The hero has to kiss the pretty lady.
It's Keanu Reeves, not Tom Cruise.
Keanu Reeves, sorry.
Yeah. It's still the 90s.
Yeah.
90s action hero.
And honestly, 90s Keanu, I get confused with Tom Cruise all the time. It's one of my failings.
But yeah, I mean, it was all about, I mean, as you were saying, Chrissy, it was pretty much, I think, the standard of hero, love interest. The two have to necessarily fall in love or share a kiss, because if not, your audience is not going to be sold. But you know, at the end of the day, it did carry on through New Who. So I'm wondering at the time, the audience, what they must have felt like. The Doctor doesn't kiss companions, you know?
I remember that being a big... remember seeing that when I was getting into Doctor Who and looking up the TV movie. And honestly, I'm trying to think if before I watched the TV movie, if I'd ever heard anything positive about it. I'd heard the Doctor was good, but everything else was just terrible. And I was like almost afraid to look it up and watch it. It really wasn't until Traveling the Vortex had their review of the TV movie when it came out, when we got the DVD here, that I'd actually heard anybody say anything nice about the movie as a whole.
It's not a bad movie, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
other than Paul's wig.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, the wig. Poor Paul and the
hair, mind you.
Yeah, I mean,
he hated that wig, and so do we.
Well, I look at it because I have naturally curly hair, and when I get up in the morning, my hair looks frizzy like that, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
I cannot relax until I've combed my hair and pulled it back and gotten it to where it's not a big boofy thing.
Right. And then hopefully there's no humidity, because if that you're
Yeah.
you're on luck.
Yeah, that's why I live in the desert. We don't have humidity very much.
You're lucky.
Thankfully, by the time Paul got to come back in 2013, he was able to get a haircut.
Yes,
and a costume upgrade.
Yes,
yeah. But that was the thing, is the reason that he had to wear that wig is because when he was cast, the producers, they had seen him in some period drama, and I can't remember which one it was, where he'd had long hair and it was his own hair. But by the time he came on set, to do Doctor Who, they were like, well, why isn't your hair long? It's like, well, I cut it. That was for that production. And they're like, no, you got to have the long hair because they had to have the whole the Lord Byron look. And so that's why he had the wig, is because the producers liked it when he was in that other show that he'd been in.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. He'd done some period things.
He did
TV movie of Catherine the Great in '95, and then he did Three Musketeers, and
he's done a lot of period drama, which
you're British, that's what you do.
Yeah.
Right.
And he does it very well. It's just it's kind of Doctor Who's kind of his oddball thing, and then with Nail and I is the other one that he's done, that he's known for. But mostly he's done period drama, and he fits very well into that genre. It's just with Doctor Who is kind of his the odd one out. Yeah. But he loves it.
I mean, it's great. I mean, but to throw a question out to you ladies in this case, did you guys actually like Daphne Ashbrook as a companion?
I thought she was good. I
don't
liked
have
her.
Any
problems with her.
Yeah, yes, her character is American. It's different than a British character, but Tegan is Australian. She's going to be different than someone from.
Well, Perry's supposed to be American.
Well, Perry's supposed to be, but she really wasn't. But no, Daphne Ashbrook, Grace, I thought she was good.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's that scene after the climax, and they roll back time, and the doctor's there's that scene with Grace and Chang Li. They're in the TARDIS, and you kind of feel like, okay, this is the jumping off point. They're going to be companions. They're going to go on adventures. This is the moment. And obviously it didn't happen. And I'm like, I feel like we could have that could have been a great team TARDIS, that we would have had a lot of fun with that if that series had happened, or if Big Finish could get the rights to those characters, because the licensing is really a mess with the TV movie.
Because it's not Fox, it's Universal that has the rights to Grace, and I'm assuming Chang Li is as well, which is why when Paul came back for the night of the Doctor, when he rattles off all of his companions and makes Big Finish canon, that Grace is not mentioned because they don't have the rights to that character.
Yeah, but it just kind of feels like they could have had some really great stories, and we could have gotten to know these characters and fleshed them out a little bit more if they'd gotten the chance. And so that's
right.
Yeah, I feel like that's a missed opportunity, but at the same time, if that show had gone to series, we wouldn't have New Who. It's a lot of wibbly wobbly that stuff.
I mean, she's kind of the American version of Liz Shaw, I found, because it was since Liz Shaw, we hadn't had a mind that could be on par with the Doctor. We had Ace, we'd had Tegan, etc., but none that was a scientist, as it were. I thought that was a great callback almost to Liz Shaw, because she was the only one who kind of almost put the Doctor in his place.
God, yeah. Oh, wow. Nick, I love that idea. I had never thought of it before, but yeah, she's a doctor, she's a medical doctor, and she even shows in the movie when her superior is, she's trying to argue with her superior that the X-ray, there's something wrong with the X-rays, and she quits her job because he wants to cover this up. You kind of get that sense like she would do the same to the Doctor if he was getting too full of himself. And yeah, she's in the mold of Liz Shaw. I'd never really thought of it that way, but that's perfect.
And even though she's a cardiologist, it's obviously that beyond just her specialty as a surgeon, as a physician, she's extremely intelligent as a whole. Like she she seemingly understands what the doctor is doing when he gets the chip from the atomic clock to fix the TARDIS. When they go into the TARDIS, unlike Chang, who walks in the TARDIS, walks back out, doesn't say it's bigger on the inside, but you can tell he's thinking it. But Grace, on the other hand, when they walk in and the doctor is playing with the beryllium chip, and she mentions that it looks pretty low tech, and he's like, well, it's a Type 40 TARDIS. It could take me to any planet in the universe, in any date in the planet's existence. He's like, temporal physics. And Grace is like, you mean like interdimensional transference? That would explain the spatial displacement when we went through as we passed over the threshold. Like, she gets it.
That's a fantastic companion. I mean, she's but also one thing that, because we talked about all this stuff of like, the stuff kind of bugged us. Did you guys find that the ending was a little bit too clean, that everybody's alive and yay, kind of bring out the fireworks and stuff?
One thing that kind of bothers me about it, and this could just be the writers trying to wrap things up because they don't know if this is going to be taken to series or anything, is Grace, the doctor asks Grace to come with him, be his companion, and she goes, no, I know who I am, and that's enough. I'm like, you don't have a job, you don't have your, you got kicked out of your house, or your whatever the thing with the house was. I would honestly, where she is, I'm like, that would honestly be the perfect jumping on point. Go with the doctor, you're his new companion, go have adventures. But that part, everybody, kind of mopping it up and everything's fine, and everyone.
Well, she invites him.
Or she
come with her. He's like, come with me. And she's like, why don't you come with me? And he's like, oh, it's tempting. It's like, doctor, you would get so bored so fast.
Yeah, you would. It would kind of be the.
Go watch The Power of Three.
Yeah, it would be the Rory and Amy thing. The doctor drops him off and comes back and hangs out with them, but then he has to go off. But it would be that thing. But that part, I always see that, and I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I buy that much, because.
But the death scenes as well, I mean, did you guys find it was a little bit odd that, the kind of this energy comes out and they're alive again kind of thing? I mean,
it is a little fairy tale, a little happily ever after kind of a thing. I think it fits nicely for what they were going for as a backdoor pilot, as wanting to take this make this into a new series. If it would just have been its own, another episode in a season of Doctor Who, it would have been really weird. But then it also, again, that climax is just so bonkers.
Yeah.
Everything about that is just, okay, you could have done that so much better and a little, a little more believable. I guess I was going to say cleaner, but I was like, nah, more believable. With everybody living and stuff, and not having it be, oh, I'm in trouble, now I'm rescued, oh, I'm in trouble again, now I'm rescued, going back and forth that way. So that one, the climax really needed to be tightened up and have some people say, or have somebody say, no, that's not going to work, that's too much, this, So, but I think that's a failing of the climax just being way too over the top.
Because had it been a regular episode, it could have been almost like the death of Adric, where there's a what the Doctor does, you know, and it would have almost had more meaning. But I mean, I suppose, I guess it's very predictable. But that's why I always was. I mean, it's horrible to say, but I was almost hoping in like a death of Adric situation where there is accountability for what the Doctor does and what he gets in.
And if if it had been another episode where we had several adventures with Grace and Chang, or gotten to know these characters, I think they would have done something like that. So that's why I'm thinking this kind of climax is more for in this TV series is more for established characters, rather than this is the first time we've met them and we're going to put them in danger and possibly kill them off. And if we kill them off, we're really going to make people mad. So I think so I kind of feel like, again, the story, it needed to be tightened up, and it also was, it's more of a finale sort of episode and not something that you want to start off with, I feel like.
Now that's as it should be. Your things. My sonic screwdriver, thank you. And, these two. Please, keep. Really? Yes, really. I better go before you change your mind. Lee! Next Christmas, take a vacation. Just don't be here. Right. Thanks. Thanks, Doctor.
See you around, Grace. There you go, interfering again.
And Grace, something you should know.
Don't tell me.
Why not?
I know who I am. That's enough.
I'm glad. Come with me.
You come with me.
Me come with you.
Yes.
Me come with you. It's tempting.
I'm gonna miss you.
How can you miss me? I'm easy to find. I'm the guy with two hearts, remember?
That's not what I meant. Thank you, Doctor.
No, thank you, Doctor.
That's my thought on it, anyway.
I can see that.
Yeah.
So, well, let's kind of start wrapping up here by talking about, I guess, the legacy of the movie, and I guess where people can go from here, as a jumping off point. So obviously we've discussed Big Finish. That's the big kahuna there. Obviously the Eighth Doctor, a lot of audios.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if you've heard this story before. I think it was on the behind the scenes on Storm Warning. One of the Eighth Doctor, the early Eighth Doctor, Big Finish. There's some behind the scenes interviews with Paul McGann. He almost didn't get to do it because his agent thought he didn't want to do Doctor Who anymore. Because Big Finish, when they were starting Big Finish, and they wanted to get as many doctors as they could involved, they actually approached Paul McGann's agent at the beginning of it, and his agent said no and never actually told Paul that they had. And then the audio started coming out, and Paul was like, wait a minute, I want to do these. So he actually called Big Finish and said, hey, I want to do this. How do I, can I come do it? And they're like, oh, we were told you didn't want to do it. I don't know what
he got a new agent.
I don't know what happened after that. I just know what Paul said in that interview.
Yeah.
Which it always cracks me up that I'm like, we almost didn't get the Eighth Doctor, which would have been a tragedy given how great his run has been, even up until even to this day. They're still doing them.
Well, and the Eighth Doctor, specifically in Big Finish, is I mean, they're all good, but he's interesting compared to the other doctors because he is, well, obviously now Big Finish is changing the way they do things, but with the main range as we know it, he's part of the main range, but then he's also got Divergent Universe.
Yeah, well,
like a whole big series in Divergent Universe.
He's part of the main range to a point, and then they spun him off into his own thing. So he hasn't been part of the main range for quite some time, but he's always been doing all the box sets and things like that.
And anytime there's a
Dark Eyes
multi-doctor story,
oh yeah,
he gets brought into it. You know, light at the end and all those fun things. So
oh yeah, he's always there.
Yeah.
And it's fun listening to him talk about it, because if you've ever heard Paul McGann talk, and he came to Salt Lake Comic-Con several years ago, and it was same year Colin Baker was here, so they had a whole big panel, and he's kind of a little soft spoken and a little more kind of got more of a quieter personality.
Yes.
But when he talks about Big Finish and talks about being Doctor Who, you can just tell that he just kind of lights up, and this is one of his favorite things to do. Even though when you first meet him, you think he might be a little too. Maybe this is why his agent thought he didn't want to do Big Finish, Doctor Who for Big Finish, is that he just kind of has that personality that you're not really sure what he's gonna do or what he's gonna say, but he's just. You talk Doctor Who with him, and he just lightens up. It brightens up, and I'm like, you're adorable.
Yeah, he is. He is a very soft-spoken, especially if you see him at an event where there's other doctors. Like I saw and met him at Chicago TARDIS the year of the 50th, and because it was the year of the 50th, they went. Go big or go home. So they had Paul there, they had Daphne there, so I've got to meet both of them. But then they had Peter Davison and Colin Baker as well. And so you get Paul and you get someone like Colin Baker in the same room. Like Colin's just larger than life. So him compared to Paul, it's like Paul is just very, he's very, he kind of feels like he could belong in like Byronic, like he could just live there, like, some sort of like, Regency era, he'd fit right in.
Oh yeah.
Very, very calm.
Hence why he's done so many period dramas.
Yes.
It's like you were born to do this, man.
Downtown Abbey.
Yeah.
Yes. They need. Yeah. If they do another Downton Abbey movie, he needs.
Yes.
So Paul is great. Obviously, as we mentioned, the characters of Grace and Chang are under lock and key with Universal, so we don't have anything with those characters. Now, those actors, Daphne and have been in Big Finish as different characters.
Yes.
Yi Ji-so has been in a 7th Doctor audio, Excelsis Decays, and then he's been in 6th Doctor webcast real time, and then Daphne has been in the audio drama The Next Life.
And that one's part of the Divergent Universe story arc, and that's kind of the finale of that one. It is so weird. Okay, the story itself is so weird, but it is also weird to hear 8th Doctor talking to someone who sounds like Grace, but it's not Grace at all.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Does do a great job though.
Yeah, she does. She is amazing. And then also, I'm sure you're gonna mention this, Rachel. They were Yi Ji-so and Daphne Ashbrook were in. They played a couple of unit officers.
Tales from the Vault.
And that one, it's kind of funny because I listened to that one. For the 50th anniversary, I did this huge blogging project, which was so much fun, and I wish I could have a reason to do something like that again. And I did a review of a bunch of different things, and this was one of them that I picked. And as I was listening to it, I just keep thinking, you know what? In my head, this is Grace and Chang, and somehow the unit got a hold of them, and they, because Grace doesn't have a job, she gets a job with Unit all of a sudden. Chang Li, he needs a job too, so he needs something to do. So yeah, these two, they're Grace and Chang Li, and nobody can convince me otherwise. Yeah. even though officially they have to be these other names because of licensing issues, but no, they're Grace, and
they just have taken on the new identities to protect themselves.
The unit protection agency, kind of like WITSEC.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. But that one is a fun one. And it also has those two as the unit officers, and then they have some interactions with some older companions of the doctors, and it's a fun one. It's one I really like.
It's definitely a great one indeed. And actually, that whole kind of creating your own universe thing is fantastic, because we actually had a theory on the Happiness and Darkness podcast about Lestrade from the Sherlock TV show being previously being the detective in V for Vendetta. He was actually a detective there, then he changed his name to Vendetta.
Nice. I like it.
Give us enough time and the internet, do some research, we can retcon anything.
I know. We're gonna make everything work.
Yes. And then speaking of which, the master, Eric Roberts' master specifically, is also in Big Finish, which some people may be like, well, he died, didn't he? He was just a one-off, and like, no, he's not. And again, it depends on kind of what extended media you consume, but the overarching theory, because I have not listened to any of the master stuff with Eric Roberts and Big Finish yet, but the overarching theory is that the master that we last saw in the TV series was played by Anthony Ainley. He does not fulfill his bargain with the Time Lords in the Five Doctors, or like called Five-ish Doctors. So he does not get that new regeneration cycle. But in fact, he, according to, I don't know if it's a novel, I think he actually loses the body that he's in, because if you remember, that's not even a regeneration. He stole that body, and from it's a Traconite body, but he does eventually get that back. What happens after survival is up for debate, but the version of the master that gets executed by the Daleks that kicks off the start of the movie is not Ainsley's master. It's a version of the master, but it's not that body. According to the novel The Eight Doctors, at some point the master was aware that he's like, I'm in this borrowed body, I don't have any more regenerations, I'm kind of screwed here, I got to do something. So being the master that he is, he kind of actually pulls a Ronnie in a way, and starts experimenting on these creatures called deathworm morphants, which are a symbiotic creature that's supposed to help you survive beyond death. Apparently these creatures were created by the Morgs and are supposed to be supposedly found on Skaro, of all places. And the master experimented on a batch of them that he managed to get his hands on, and the one that worked with his experiments, he swallowed it so that he could live, quote unquote, beyond his execution when he goes to Skaro to be executed by the Daleks. Obviously, that body that's played by Eric Roberts, he falls into the Eye of Harmony. That some essence of the master survives within the TARDIS for a time, and gets into trouble as best he can while essentially, quote unquote, living inside the TARDIS. so he does that for a time after the events of the TV movie Imprisoned in the Eye of Harmony, or at least a version of the Eye of Harmony, the Doctor's TARDIS's Eye of Harmony. And at some point, the eye tries to break him down, what's left of him, but he is able to essentially, he ends up stranded in the vortex and goes through a whole bunch of things. That there's some audios that somewhat get into it, which I think includes some of the new audios that we're getting with the multiple masters, including Michelle Gomez and all that. So, but at some point, his essence is able to escape, and he ends up chameleon arching himself into a infant and goes off to Utopia, and that's how we end up with the Derek Jacobi chameleon arched master.
Well,
so
they wrote themselves, the Doctor Who continuity wrote themselves into a corner. Big Finish wrote them out.
Yes.
Kind of.
Yeah. So again, Big Finish, if you want to try and figure out how exactly they're continuing on with Eric Roberts as a version of the Master, Big Finish is your jam. So
they somehow they managed to do it. Those brilliant.
Which, yeah,
people.
I was excited, when they were all like, oh yeah, we're going to be doing stuff with more versions of the Master, because obviously Delgado and Ainley are no longer with us, so they've had other people playing versions of the Master. But then when Big Finish started making these announcements, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to do like a multi-Master story, and we're going to get Michelle Gomez and blah, 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 and they're like, and we got Eric Roberts, and all of us were like, wait, what?
Especially because we've heard a few horror stories about him at conventions, although apparently he's gotten better, so
Yeah.
You know what?
Apparently he, for a while there, he kind of went the Christopher Eccleston route.
Well,
kind of.
Not really, but I mean, he came to him, but he was. There's a difference between not going to the conventions and going, but being kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
But apparently he's gotten better. So you know what? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Also, I want to hear him in Big Finish because this sounds. I think I have the River Song one queued up somewhere. I'm still working on getting through all those, but yeah, when I heard he was going to be back with Big Finish, I'm like, wow, how much are they paying him?
Yeah, really.
Or maybe he's like kind of come around to like, you know what, I'll do this for fun.
Yeah, well, Masterful is definitely something that I'm really looking forward to. I mean, it's like kind of the Infinity War of Big Finish. I mean, I can't wait for that.
Yeah. So, and of course the movie itself, it is available on DVD. It's kind of hard to get your hands on, and it's kind of pricey.
Yeah.
So it has been released on Blu-ray, which is, compared to actually to the DVD, is cheaper.
Yeah. I actually bought it. I actually found it on Amazon Italy from an English seller on Blu-ray, and because in Italy you will never find it, but I was able to find it on Amazon. Some kind soul in the UK was selling them, and yeah, I picked it up on Blu-ray. And it's true, Rachel. It's so weird that it's cheaper on Blu-ray than it is on DVD.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because depending on what you can get your hands on, you may or may not actually get a slightly different version of the film. It was supposed to be released on home video back in the day when we had cassettes. But in the UK, they already had the home video release scheduled, but the British Board of Film Classification required them to have the same cuts as the UK broadcast version, because when it aired in the UK, it was before 9 p.m., which is kind of their cutoff for what's appropriate for all ages versus the kids should be in bed and shouldn't be watching TV any longer. So the broadcast in the UK, the seventh Doctor's death on the operating table was trimmed down, including that final scream. Chang Li's gang friends, them getting gunned down, was actually completely cut out. So it appears that they just vanished into thin air.
They're there and then they're not.
Yeah. When BBC America showed it again during the 50th anniversary, Doctors Revisited, they actually showed that version, the cut version. So when it was going to be released on home video, they wanted that cut. So they had to delay the release on home video. Then in '97 in Hong Kong, exclusively in Hong Kong, they released a laserdisc version.
Wow.
There was an unedited version released on DVD in the UK in 2001, and it was titled as Doctor Who the Movie. That was re-released in 2007 as a limited edition with an alternate cover, but the content's not any different. But that was part of a series of classic series re-releases. There are edited and unedited versions that have been released in countries such as Australia and New Zealand. The 2010 DVD box set Revisitations contains the movie with special edition DVD features, including commentary with Paul McGann, Sylvester McCoy, documentary on the time between the film and the series cancellation in '89, a documentary on the 7 years it took to get the film made, a documentary on the Eighth Doctor's comic strip adventures, a documentary on the media reaction to the Eighth Doctor, a documentary on ties with Blue Peter and Doctor Who, as well as the original features, including the original commentary with Jeffrey Sachs. But because of licensing issues, no VHS release of the film ever occurred in the US or North America. For more than a decade, no DVD release occurred. And then in 2010, they announced an updated version will be released in North America following negotiations with Universal. And then the North American DVD release is a 2-disc Doctor Who the Movie Special Edition, was announced to be released on the 8th of February 2011. And then it was released on DVD again as part of the Doctors Revisited box set. And then, there's a 2-disc Blu-ray set in Region 2 that was released in 2016. That footage has not been rescanned from the original film negatives. Instead, it's been upscaled.
Huh.
So
that must be the copy that I end up buying.
Maybe.
I reckon, yeah.
Yeah. So depending on what you have, and when you bought it and what country you're in, you may have a slightly different version.
Yeah.
It's like Star Wars.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm like even looking on, because I was like curious, like, is it on iTunes? Like, can't even find it on iTunes.
It's not even on BritBox.
Not on
No.
BritBox. Yeah, any
Yeah.
Amazon streaming, it's not there. So if you,
it's because of all of the. I think it's because of all the licensing.
So if you were lucky in the U.S., lucky enough to get the DVD when it first came out,
or the Doctors Revisited, because the Eighth Doctor one is in there.
Yeah.
Then hang on to that for all it's worth, because.
American Amazon, you can buy the DVD, the basic DVD. They've got it listed for like $26, $27. They've got the special edition DVD. It's $50.
Yeah.
And then the Blu-ray is $18.
Yeah, but that Blu-ray doesn't play on North American. So.
Oh, yes, true. You guys have that issue. I know. Yeah.
Yeah, we're in a different region, so it stinks.
Yeah.
So in this era of a new Justice League cut and a new Suicide Squad cut, do we want a new Doctor Who cut?
I'd just be happy with a decent resolution.
Yeah.
I
Plays
think
in the U.S.
I think it's one of those. I'm like, you know what? It's there. Don't touch it. It's kind of a historical artifact, maybe call it. And let's let Paul McGann be awesome on Big Finish.
Yeah,
go from there because. Yeah. But that's the TV movie. Oh, and also because I'm searching on Amazon because I was curious, they're actually doing a re-release. Okay, I'm not quite sure if this is the novelization or if it's a different one. They're releasing the TV movie as a Target novelization out, I guess in July
for 2021.
For 20. Oh, okay. I'm trying to find the date, but this one says July 2020, but maybe 2021 somewhere else. I don't know. These pre-order things can get kind of wonky, but I'm like, oh, hey. And they don't have a cover up yet. But so if you want the novelization, it looks like it's going to be on sale in paperback and Kindle sometime soonish. So
yeah.
I didn't realize back to the DVDs. I didn't realize they got so expensive. Glad.
When they're out of print, I guess it's like it feels like all those classic Doctor Who DVDs. They had their initial run, and then they just kind of stopped making them. And some are still available, but because I was looking through them, seeing which ones I still needed, and there were some that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not paying that. Sorry.
And then some of them they're slowly doing the on demand, so they're a little bit cheaper.
Yeah. Well, and now they're doing the Blu-ray box sets with like seasons, full season Doctor.
I know.
So it's like if you had like individual stories on DVD and you want to upgrade to Blu-ray, you might as well just wait until they release,
the
Tom
season
Baker's season, blah blah blah, on these really nice Blu-ray box sets. So if you want to get your hands on, the version, because obviously the Blu-ray, if you're American, unless you've got something that's not region locked that you can play a Blu-ray, you're stuck spending almost $50 for the special. If you want all those feeters, you're
and it's a 2-disc set,
DVD.
so you're $25 the DVD, which little on the pricey
still
side.
it's only one movie.
True.
It came to the point with those DVDs. It came to the point with those DVDs where you weren't necessarily buying the episodes, but you were buying all those documentaries and extra features.
The bonus features.
Because they did some amazing documentaries on those things, and I'm like, I do not begrudge myself all those DVDs, even though my husband looks at them like, you really like Doctor Who, don't you? I'm like, well, he likes it too. He just he ribs me for it a little bit. And I'm like, well, you've got a ton of D&D minis, so.
My parents did that when we were moving. It's like, how many boxes of Doctor Who stuff are we bringing?
Enough.
It's like you got your thing. Now just let me have mine.
Mine, exactly.
But it was like you were saying, Chrissy, about the fact of it being discontinued. I mean, heck, when I had to go and pick up my copy of Howard the Duck, which now I proudly own on DVD, and I will add the word proudly, I was able to find it for €8, but on Amazon it was running for like $100.
Oh gosh!
Ouch!
Wow! You know, people. I mean, they find this stuff and they're cleaning out, and they're like, "Hey, I can probably scalp this and make a pretty penny," and they do. And I guess people buy it for that much because otherwise they
supply and demand.
Yep.
Yeah, especially the Doctor Who fans that are completionists and are like, it's like I've got all of, this, but I'm missing this one, and it's the one that's out of print, and they want like $100 for a single Doctor Who story.
I know. I'm like, I'll wait for those Blu-rays to come out, and a bunch have, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna start putting those on my wish list.
Yeah.
People are like, what do you want for your birthday? This.
Yes.
Here you go.
that
Blu-ray.
If you look for Revenge of the Cybermen, the Tom Baker episode, on eBay, it's going for insane amounts of money.
Oh, I believe it.
Oh,
gosh, I believe it. Oh. Well, any more thoughts about the Doctor Who TV movie?
We love Paul McGann.
Yes. And Sylvester McCoy.
Yeah. And Daphne Ashbrook's great too. So Gigi. So you guys are all wonderful. Thanks for coming back and doing Big Finish.
Eric Roberts, the jury's still out.
Yeah.
I think he's coming around. I think he's redeeming himself.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, if any of our listeners want to chime in on what they think of the TV movie, the movie itself, its the lead up to it, its legacy, any thoughts you might have, send us an email, will ya? Our email address is 5ishfangirls@gmail.com. You can also go to our website, which is the5ishfangirls.com, and find links to all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We have a YouTube channel. You can download us on Apple Podcasts, on Google Play, on Stitcher, and on Spotify. And wherever you find podcasts, there we are. And if you feel so inclined, you can help support the show, keeping us on your, coming out to you on the interwebs, as it were. We have a Patreon, and we thank all of our Patreon supporters for their support there. We also have a merchandise shop. We've got some new designs. If you've been following our D&D campaign, we keep coming up with funny in-jokes.
Yeah,
and Rachel's sitting there going like, "That one's going on a sticker."
Yeah. I always have paper and stuff handy because I take notes during the D&D sessions to keep track of stuff. But every now and then something will come out of someone's mouth. I'm like, all right, that's going on a shirt.
So we're constantly updating as we're having ideas. So check that out. All that goes back to. It's our Redbubble merch shop. It goes back to support the podcast. Also, our Amazon affiliate link. If you're shopping on Amazon for those $50 Doctor Who DVDs, you might as well click through on our link.
Mm-hmm.
And also
give us the 5 cents we'll get from that $50 DVD purchase.
Hey, every little bit helps.
It helps,
and you're
yeah.
shopping anyway, so that there's our link. And then also if you we also have a Ko-fi account, and then also we announced it last week. We'll make sure you remember it again. We have an Audible affiliate link, so if you are not yet an Audible member and you want to be, and you want to help support us, you can do all of that through our website and go to our Audible membership link, and that will help support us as well. So again, our website is the5ishfangirls.com. That's where you can find all of our goodness. And thank you again to all of our supporters, our commenters, our listeners, all of you wonderful people like Nick, who have listened to us and supported us through these at any point during these past 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still kind of flabbergasted that, holy cow, 6 years we're still doing this, and we're having a lot of fun with it. And part of that is down to, we have listeners, we have supporters, we have people who want us to keep doing this. And so as long as you guys are out there and as long as this remains fun, we're going to keep doing it. So I don't know if that's a promise or a threat. That's up to you guys.
However you take it.
No, it's been fun, and it's been good. And this was a good way to celebrate. And big thank you to our friend Nick, friend of the podcast, friend of the show, one of our listeners, coming on to discuss Doctor Who the movie. Anything else you want to plug before we sign off, Nick?
No, I think we're pretty much good to go. I mean, I just want to thank you all so much for having me and allowing me to crash your 6th birthday party. I really appreciate that. You were fantastic, and I definitely want to endorse the fact that anybody listening out there, please check out these incredible ladies. They're definitely worth your time. They know their stuff. They're insightful. They're fun. They're entertaining. So you guys definitely have my vote indeed.
Thank you so much. And a party's only as good as its crashers.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll make sure to put links to as much of Nick's stuff as possible. Thankfully, our website, our blogs don't have a character limit, so unlike Twitter.
So we'll link to all the things where you can find Nick and tell him the fangirl sent you.
Yep.
So, all right. So and quick last little bit of housekeeping, just so our listeners know, we will not have a new show next week. So we will be taking the week off because now that the world is slightly opening up, I am taking a much needed vacation. So that there may or may not be exciting things happening during said vacation that I will discuss when I get back. So, but we will talk about that when I get back. We can talk about that after we stop recording, but not right now.
Nope.
Not while the record button's still going. So, but we will have D&D content up, so this will be a good opportunity for you to get caught up on D&D while we're off next week. So and you can listen to Nick and I's new show because the new first inaugural episode will be out. So all right, so with that we shall sign off for this week.
This is Chrissy saying goodnight from Salt Lake City.
This is Holly from Wisconsin saying good evening.
And this is Rachel in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's our birthday party, but you're going to have to supply your own cake.
To the Five-ish Fangirls podcast. You can find more episodes and information at thefivishfangirls.com. Any and all books, movies, games, and any other forms of media mentioned are owned and operated by the respective copyright holders. No copyright infringement is intended or implied. If you wish to support the show, the easiest way is to leave us a rating and review. More ratings and reviews will make it easier for others to find the show. If you wish to support us monetarily, you can do so at patreon.com/5ishfangirlspodcast. All money goes towards fees and equipment to keep the show going. For official Five-ish Fangirls merchandise, visit redbubble.com/people/5ishfangirls. We love hearing from our listeners and encourage feedback. You can email us at fiveishfangirls@gmail.com. You can also like and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/5ishfangirls. Thank you so much for listening, and may the squee be with you.